My my dream car is the Carrera GT, Porsche Carrera GT.
This real-life twist that all tales in the joyride that ended in a fiery crash taking actor Paul Walker tree under cold, both went 140 miles per hour, reportedly being sold for more than...
Some legends are born from the roar of a high-performance engine, while others are defined by the silence that follows a sudden, tragic stop. In the world of action cinema, there is a distinct line between the characters we see on screen and the flesh and blood humans who inhabit them. For over a decade, Paul Walker walked that line with a rare kind of grace. To the world, he was Brian O'Connor, the undercover cop turned street racing outlaw who became the heart of a billion-dollar empire built on the ideals of speed and family. But in the autumn of 2013, the fast lane led to a horizon no one was prepared to face. It was supposed to be a milestone, the seventh installment of a franchise that had evolved from a niche racing flick into a global phenomenon. Instead, it became a haunting memorial, a production drenched in a heaviness that mirrored the darkest legends of Hollywood's past. This is the story of what really happened on the set of Furious 7, a journey through a fiery tragedy, a technical miracle of digital resurrection, and a script that had to be rewritten by the hand of fate itself. The year was 2013, and the Fast and Furious saga was at its absolute zenith. Audiences were hungry for something bigger, and the production of the seventh film was already being described as the start of a brand new trilogy that would take the Toretto family into darker, more complex territory. Paul Walker was 40 years old, at the peak of his career, and finally seeing the franchise lean into the themes of fatherhood and legacy that he cherished in his private life. But on November 30, 2013, the cameras weren't rolling. The production was on a scheduled break for the Thanksgiving holiday, allowing the cast and crew a moment of peace before the final push of filming. Paul was in Santa Clarita, California, hosting a toy drive for his charity, Reach Out Worldwide, to support victims of a typhoon in the Philippines. It was a day defined by his generosity, a quiet Saturday where he was just Paul, the guy who loved the ocean, his daughter Meadow, and the thrill of the road. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, Paul hopped into the passenger seat of a red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT owned by his longtime friend and professional driver, Roger Rodas. As they pulled out of the parking lot, witnesses heard them say they'd be back in just 5 minutes. It was a simple promise that would soon become a haunting echo. On Hercules Street, a stretch of road with a 45-mile-per-hour limit, the Porsche was traveling at a speed exceeding 100 miles per hour. For reasons that investigators would spend months debating, Rodas lost control. The car spun, jumping the sidewalk and slamming into a tree and a light pole on the driver's side with such violence that the vehicle was nearly split in two. CCTV footage would later reveal a terrifying detail. Nearly a full minute passed after the initial impact before the car burst into flames. The aftermath was a nightmare of smoke and charred metal. When the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department arrived, they found a scene so devastating that identification through visual means was impossible. The coroner's report would eventually paint a grim picture of those final moments. Roger Rodas died almost instantly from multiple traumatic injuries, but the autopsy revealed soot in Paul Walker's trachea. It meant he was still breathing when the fire started. He died from a combination of traumatic impact and thermal exposure, his life ending in a fiery wreck just 10 miles from where his character's final moments were destined to be filmed. The irony was a gut punch to the industry. The man who made the silver Supra an icon was consumed by the very speed he had spent his life celebrating. In the wake of the crash, Hollywood stood still. Universal Pictures faced a choice that felt impossible. Do you scrap a $150 million production that was only halfway finished? Do you recast a character who had been there since the first quarter mile in 2001? The set of Furious 7 was plunged into a state of absolute chaos and mourning. Vin Diesel, Paul's brother on and off screen, was shattered, spending weeks unable to face the cameras. The production was suspended indefinitely as the Fast family struggled to breathe. There were whispers that the movie should never be finished, that it was a dread of the past to try and piece together a performance from a man who was no longer there. But as the grief began to settle into a resolve, the cast and crew decided to do something far more complicated and reverent. They chose to finish the film as a tribute, a love letter to Paul Walker. However, the logistical hurdles were immense. Paul had filmed most of the big action set pieces, but the emotional glue, the quiet, character-driven moments that made the audience care about Brian O'Connor, was missing. This is where the magic of Hollywood met the depths of human grief. Screenwriter Chris Morgan and director James Wan had to step back and completely pivot. Originally, the movie was not supposed to be a goodbye. It was designed to be an expansion. According to early script details and the recent reveals from the book Welcome to the Family, the original ending was supposed to take the crew back to Neptune's Net, the Malibu seafood joint where Brian and Dom first bonded. In that version, the team would have celebrated the retrieval of the God's Eye device. Dom was supposed to receive a congressional commendation, only to crumple it up and toss it out the window, signaling that the team was becoming a group of elusive bad guys working illegal missions for Mr. Nobody. Brian wasn't retiring. He was moving into a darker, more criminal world alongside Dom. The tragedy forced a total rewrite of the franchise's future. The goal shifted from expansion to retirement. The writers realized they couldn't kill Brian O'Connor off-screen. It would have been insensitive and cruel given the nature of Paul's accident. Instead, they decided to give Brian the white picket fence ending he deserved, allowing him to walk away from the life of crime to be with Mia and his children. To make this work, the production turned to Weta Digital, the visual effects wizards behind Avatar and Lord of the Rings. They were tasked with a digital resurrection that had never been attempted on this scale. The process was both technical and deeply emotional. They used 3 distinct methods to bring Brian back. First, they scoured every frame of archival footage from Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6. If Paul had a specific way of squinting or a half smile in a deleted scene, they rotoscoped his face and relit it to fit the new environments of the 7th film. Second, they brought in Paul's brothers, Caleb and Cody Walker, to serve as body doubles. Because they shared his gait, his height, and his basic facial structure, they provided the physical soul for the performance. On set, the experience was eerie. Vin Diesel had to film scenes with men who looked and sounded just enough like his fallen friend to make the grief fresh every single day. In some instances, the crew even had to tape Caleb's ears back because they stuck out further than Paul's. The third method was the most advanced: digital mapping. Weta created a 3D digital head of Paul, using the brothers' scans as a base and layering on Paul's skin textures, wrinkles, and even the way his blood vessels reacted to light. They had to be extra careful to avoid the uncanny valley, that unsettling feeling when a digital face looks almost human but lacks a soul. Sound editors even had to create new dialogue by blending the brothers' voices with old recordings of Paul. When you watch the final cut today, most people cannot spot the 350 digital shots. Whether it's Brian looking down at Los Angeles from a hilltop, or the wide shots of him playing with his son on the beach, you are seeing a miracle of 2015 technology fueled by a family's love. While the tech was groundbreaking, the investigation into the crash continued to haunt the production. While some speculated about street racing or a mechanical failure, the truth revealed by investigators was more mundane and devastating. The Porsche Carrera GT was a notoriously difficult car to drive, often described as a race car for the street. The investigation by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and stunt experts hired by the family eventually pointed to a critical factor: the tires. The car was equipped with low-profile racing tires that were over 9 years old. They were too worn to handle the 100-mile-per-hour force Rodas put them under. A 10-minute check of those tires might have changed history, a fact that added a layer of preventable tragedy to the loss. As the production neared its end, the filmmakers realized they needed an ending that didn't just close a movie, but closed a chapter of their lives. The final 5 minutes of Furious 7 became one of the most famous sequences in cinema history. It was a moment that nearly broke the fourth wall. When Dom pulls up to that final stoplight and looks over to see Brian in a white Toyota Supra, the emotion is real. That Supra wasn't just a prop, it was Paul Walker's personal car, a final nod to the man behind the character. The song See You Again by Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth wasn't just a chart topper, it was a global mourning event. When the two cars reached the fork in the road, Dom's Charger staying on the main path of the franchise and Brian's Supra heading toward the horizon, it was a goodbye to a brother. The movie went on to gross over $1.5 billion, but for the cast, the numbers didn't matter as much as the closure. Vin Diesel has often said he can't envision a Fast film without Pablo's soul being the guiding spirit. The franchise has continued to find innovative ways to honor him without over-relying on tasteless CGI. In F9, we saw his blue Nissan Skyline pull up to the family barbecue, a non-visual cameo that proved Brian's presence is still the heartbeat of the series. In Fast X, the filmmakers used flashback footage from Fast 5 to bring Paul back into the action, showing him once again stealing the vault in Rio. But the tragedy of Paul Walker also served as a mirror for the industry, much like the death of Brandon Lee on the set of The Crow 20 years earlier. Both men were taken in their prime, leaving behind unfinished masterpieces that forced Hollywood to look at its own negligence and the ethics of digital resurrection. Brandon Lee's death was caused by a series of cut corners and a failure of safety protocols regarding a prop gun. Paul Walker's death, while occurring off-set, highlighted the dangers of the very culture of speed the film celebrated. In the years since, the Fast family has transformed into a support system for Paul's daughter, Meadow, who even made a cameo in the franchise to honor her father's legacy. As we look toward the future and the upcoming Fast 11, the question remains how the saga will truly say goodbye to Brian O'Connor. Vin Diesel has promised a proper send-off that honors the roots of the saga. There are rumors that digital rendering will be used one last time to give the character a final appearance, ensuring the story doesn't leave a glaring plot hole regarding the villain Dante's revenge. But regardless of what happens on screen, the real story of Paul Walker is one of a man who lived his life a quarter mile at a time, but spent every mile focused on the people he loved. He was a man of the ocean, a marine biologist at heart, who got distracted by acting. He was a father who found his greatest role in a delivery room, cutting the umbilical cord of his daughter. He was a friend who would buy a wedding ring for a couple he just met in a jewelry store, simply because they couldn't afford it. The magic of Hollywood was able to finish a movie, but it could never replace the soul of the man who started it. When the screen fades to white at the end of Furious 7 and the words "For Paul" appear, it isn't just a dedication. It's a reminder that buildings burn and people die, but real love and the legends it creates is forever. Paul Walker still drives through our collective memory, heading toward that horizon where the road never ends, reminding us that even in the face of the most fiery tragedies, it can't rain all the time. The legacy of Brian O'Connor remains a safe haven for the next generation, a poignantly adapted history that hammers home the series' themes of family, memory, and the unbreakable bond of those who ride together.
Paul didn't just chase fame, he chased meaning. And in that brief, beautiful flash of time, he became a legend that doesn't fade. Because in the end, it's not about how the road ended, it's about the family we chose to ride with. See you again, Paul.